Support for Up First Winter Games comes from NPR sponsor Allianz Travel Insurance. Get ready to give ordinary the cold shoulder with protection for adventures that give you the best kind of chills. Learn more at AllianzTravelInsurance.com.
American cross-country skier Jessie Diggins is back on the slopes, still looking for redemption. Diggins is the most decorated cross-country skier in U.S. history and winner of 3 Olympic medals. But on Saturday in the women's skiathlon, Diggins got tangled up in a crowd of skiers and crashed. She finished 8th. And Tuesday, she failed to advance in the classic sprint race. Diggins' strongest race comes later in the week, so NPR's Brian Mann is here to give us a preview. Brian, what has happened with Diggins?
Yeah, it's been a struggle for her so far. She's been skiing events so far, that include the classic skiing technique. It's a little complicated for non-skiers, but there are really 2 basic ways that skiers propel themselves. One is by sort of skating. It looks like an ice skating motion almost. The other is striding straight forward in classic. And that's what she's been competing in so far. That's not really her strength. And as you say, in one of those races, she got tangled up. She hit a bit of slush on the track, crashed and went down. And so far, this has not been her Olympics, but there's a lot more to come.
Right, because her strength is coming up.
That's right. She's going to do a classic skate race later this week, and we're going to be watching that very closely. When I talked to her before the Olympics, she said she really looks at that as her biggest shot at medaling in this, what's going to be her last Olympic Games. She's announced she's retiring after these Olympics, and so we're going to be watching very closely. She talked about how much pressure is going to be on her in that race.
Yeah, so there's a sense of urgency, right? You mentioned it's her last Olympics. I mean, this is it. She's got to do it now or never, ever again. Tell us about the people and the competition that wants to keep her off the medal stand.
You know, it's really all about Sweden. The women from the Swedish team have looked dominant in this Olympics so far. There have been just these 2 races, right? And these women from Sweden have captured 5 medals already. They're really carrying their national team. Some of these women have just looked incredibly powerful. Lynn Svan was out there in this classic sprint race today. She took gold. Jonas Sundling right behind her, taking silver. And then earlier we saw Frida Karlsson and Ebba Andersson winning gold and silver in Saturday's skiathlon. And they've all really talked about how cross-country skiing is at the center of their national culture. It's sort of the football, the U.S. football of Sweden. And so it's really something that they bring home with enormous pride. They just have a very different deep bench culture, and it's really showing so far in these games.
Cross-country skiers make it look so easy, Brian, but it's really one of the most physically demanding sports there possibly is.
It is a sport that even for amateur skiers like myself who get out there, it's draining and tough. And when they compete in these various lengths with these various techniques, we talked about that, they have to master all these different styles of skiing. And it also brings together this incredible crush of endurance racing often that then combines with sprinting, where they have to pull these reserves of power and strength in the final strides. And it's one of the most technical. These athletes are literally tested for how well their blood can convert oxygen into their muscles. And if you're not truly a powerful machine, you can't even qualify. And then on top of that, there are years of deep training to get to where all of these different responses can kick in. And the final piece is mental. You know, this is one of the most grueling mental competitions out there. And for these women to go out there and put in race after race like this, they have to be sharp. Most of them now work with therapists. They work with mental trainers as well as physical trainers. So it's something that they have to dial in just right.
And one more thing, Brian, on their training, the cold, is that something that they're used to by now and just an accepted part of what they do?
Yeah, it can be brutally cold, and in some conditions that can be a real factor in the race. Right now, what we're seeing in the mountains of Italy is that it's not particularly cold. In fact, these are beautiful skiing conditions. But one thing that you bring up there that's really complicated, that can change the texture of a race, is what temperature does to the snow. Right? These skiers are out there on skis that have been waxed. And again, this is complicated for people who aren't deep into the sport, but they're essentially putting in these layers of very carefully applied wax that can vary depending on the temperature of the day, the atmospheric pressure of the day. It's really dialed in. And so sometimes what you'll see is an athlete who's in prime condition but then they'll struggle on race day because their teams didn't get the wax just right.
Wow.
So temperature, conditioning, psychology, all of that comes together in this sport, and they just have to time it exactly right.
All right. Now, you did a lengthy interview with Jessie Diggins. Tell us about that.
You know, this was one of the most powerful interviews. NPR's team traveled around the country talking to athletes ahead of these games, and sitting down with Jessie Diggins in Vermont, where she trains, hearing about her talk about this kind of final chapter of her career. And one of the things that she's really become much more outspoken about, as she's built this bigger platform for herself, is mental health. And she has talked openly about struggling with an eating disorder. After she won her gold medal, it really resurfaced. It's something she's had throughout her career that she's worked on, but it came back after she won that gold. She said there was new pressure on her. And here's what she told me.
It's sometimes hard for people to find compassion for an injury that isn't visible from the outside. But oftentimes, it's also not understood that eating disorders are often not about food. It's not really about your body or what it looks like. For me, it was about control and a struggle with perfectionism. And I thought I had to be perfect.
One of the things that she's been talking about in these Olympics is having fun again and getting away from that aspiration towards being perfect in every race. One of the things that Jessie Diggins does is she puts glitter on her face before going out there to compete. She says it just kind of chills her out. It makes her remember that this is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be something that she's enjoyed since she was a little kid. And so she's finding ways to not just win, which hopefully we'll see going forward, but also ways to do it with joy.
You know, Brian, we watch these athletes on TV and we think they're superhuman. And in so many ways they are, right? Because they do something that hardly anyone in the world can do. But then to hear Jessie Diggins talk about some things that are deeply personal, it kind of brings her back to kind of our level a little bit. So we know that they are human in so many ways. And that's always very reassuring to hear. Now, one more thing before we let you go, because there was a United States rare medal in cross-country sprint. Tell us about that.
Yeah, this is really kind of a history-making moment here in these games. Ben Ogden from Vermont is the first American male skier. Jessie Diggins has medaled in recent games, but he's the first American male skier to grab a silver medal since 1976, since the Innsbruck Games. He looked incredibly dominant on Tuesday. He ran in these quarterfinal races really leading. He looked strong again and again. And then in the final race, he couldn't take gold. He was behind the Norwegian skier by just a heartbeat, but it was a powerful moment for him. And for the U.S. ski team, you know, I talked about the depth of the Swedish bench. Well, on the men's side, they've been trying to build that bench there. And so seeing Ben Ogden step forward, it's a real sign of progress for him to be back on the medal, breaking a really long drought.
That's NPR's Brian Mann looking dashing in that NPR scarf. Brian, thank you.
Thanks, A.